Hello again, friends. Mandy Smith again. This time I thought it might be interesting to guide you through the process of writing your own confessions. So we've often thought of confession as being confessing sin in the usual sense, which is usually kind of the vices. And, we notice when a Christian leader really messes up. We see the headlines of when they do something immoral or just unwise, and it's easy to kind of think, oh well, I wouldn't do that, I wouldn't embezzle money or wreck a whole church or whatever. But I think it's really good for us to notice that oftentimes those big headline kinds of issues begin 2 years earlier, on a Tuesday afternoon, when a meeting just doesn't go as planned or a sermon just doesn't come together, and there are things that we are tempted to lean on in those moments. And so I think it's really important. Sometimes the really big obvious sins and vices are in some ways less evil because they're easy to pinpoint, and the things that I think actually cause some of the most damage are the things that might not seem so harmful and that are easy to not notice, like on a Wednesday afternoon when the sermon's not coming together, on a Thursday night when we're in a meeting and somebody makes us feel stupid, on a Sunday morning when somebody confronts us right after the service, or when there's just griefs that are too much for our hearts to bear, when there are questions that we can't answer, when people want us to understand every passage of scripture and what it means for our particular time and place, and just when somebody in the church is dealing with a pain that we can't fix. There are so many things that tempt us to want to be in control and to be more than we can ever be. And so those are moments when we have temptations to turn from our ordinary human limitation and to try to be God, which I think is what the enemy was doing in the wilderness with Jesus, saying, you have such a big mission, I can't distract you from that mission, but what I could do is shame you and make you ashamed of how small you are and how limited you are and how small your feet feel compared to how big this world is, and how small your voice is compared to how far you want this message to go. And every time Jesus refused to be ashamed of his human limitation and refused to just go back to being entirely divinity and chose to be God in human form, walking around the world like us, otherwise his story wouldn't mean so much to us. And so I just encourage you to look for those moments. Where is there a moment in your life or a situation that you're dealing with that just makes you feel small or inadequate, that makes you feel like you can't answer this question, you can't carry this problem, you can't resolve this tension, you can't understand this thing? Those often are the moments when we actually have this more subtle temptation to turn from God. And what is it that you need to confess in that place? Is there a way that you're depending on something else as your hope instead of on God? And so what does it look like to confess the ways that you're leaning on other things and moving towards other things? And then maybe there's a way to have a second kind of confession as well, a confession of faith, a confession of your dependence on God, even if it actually doesn't feel like what you wanted to, even if you would rather keep depending on this other thing. It begins with that turning of saying, I'm choosing you again, God. I'm choosing to trust that you're here. I'm choosing to trust that you're good. I'm choosing to trust that you're powerful and that you're working, even though I can't see it and I can't feel it. It's an act of will, and in a way that's kind of freeing, because we can't always control our feelings, we can't always control how well we believe, but we can make a choice. We can just choose to say, I'm going to choose God one more time. I'm going to trust that he's here one more time, even if I can't believe it well or I can't feel it well. I can choose it. So I just encourage you to find those moments, maybe just something small today that is an invitation, an opportunity to confess your reliance on yourself and confess once more your choice to depend on God in that. Bless you, friends.